To order, please rise for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. We don't have anyone to lead us in invocation this evening, so we'll take a minute of silence. Thank you. Now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Here.
Mrs. Hoover.
Here.
Ms. Royce.
Here.
Mr. Kelch. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Here. Mr. Braden.
Here. We have 6 members present this evening. Moving on to amendment of agenda, we have 3 items actually. 2 committee reports. The first is the Committee of the Whole Report, 3/14/23, and the Housing, Health, and Public Safety, April 16, 2023. And we are adding in the L1, second reading of ordinances and resolutions, resolution adopting the City of Norwood Treasurer's Office investment policy. Mrs. Franzen.
I move we amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen. May I have a second? Mr. Braden.
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
Question, we have in the investment policy packet, it's a second ordinance, or ordinance of the City of Norwood, Ohio, authorizing non-union employee pay rates. I believe that was meant to be considered this evening as well.
I have a copy of that.
It's attached in the middle of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And then also, Mrs. Franzen and Mr. Braden, would you amend your motion to add an ordinance of the City of Norwood, Ohio, authorizing non-union employee rates?
I will amend my motion as stated.
Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir. Second.
Thank you,
Amended
Mr. Braden.
My second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item F, minutes of previous meeting, April 25th, 2023, regular meeting. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to accept the minutes as written.
Motion by Mr. Braden to accept the minutes. Mrs. Hoover?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Moving on to public hearings. We have 2 public hearings this evening. I hereby open this public hearing. H1, public notice is hereby given that the City of Norwood, Ohio proposes to modify its 3-year Community Development Block Grant projects as funded by Hamilton County, Ohio. Norwood proposes to amend its 3-year MOU with Hamilton County in order to reallocate $227,550 in CDBG funds from the ADA curb replacement project and the sidewalk improvements ADA and safety matching program to the Smith Road ADA reconstruction project. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and speak about this project? No one? Then I hereby close this public hearing. We have a second public hearing this evening. I hereby open this public hearing. Norwood City Council will hold a hearing to consider the City of Norwood's claim against Elena Hammock and My Prosperity LLC. 1, to determine if there is evidence that there is litter on the land at 1911 Crown Avenue, defined in Ohio Revised Code 731.51B, and item 2, whether the council authorizes immediate written notice to Elena Hammock and her company, My Prosperity LLC, of council's finding that there is litter on her land and that she must collect and remove all the litter within 15 days after the written notice. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and testify? Good evening, Mr. Shelby.
Good evening.
Mr. Gary, would you like to swear him in?
Yes. Sir, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Would you say your name, please?
James Shelby.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm the Public Health Nuisance Inspector for the Norwood City Board of Health.
Pursuant to your duties, have you had occasion to have contact with a property known as 1911 Crown Avenue?
Yes, sir.
And that's in the city of Norwood, Hamilton County, Ohio, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What contact have you had with that property which has caused the request for this public hearing?
Observing the overall exterior conditions of the property from the adjacent property that abut this property and from the public right of way.
And what have you observed?
We've documented an accumulation of junk, trash, and debris, et cetera, on the property.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to turn your attention to a packet of photographs that's marked exhibit number 1 and represent to you that there are 12 photographs in that exhibit.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever seen those photographs before?
Yes, sir.
And when did you first see them?
Well, I took the photographs myself on this date, May 4th of 2023.
And so that was
published these.
last Thursday?
I would rely on you to tell me what
Okay.
the 4th was. I apologize.
That's all right.
Whatever day the 4th was, yes.
Okay. And do those photographs fairly and accurately depict the condition of the property when you took those photographs?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Directing your attention to exhibit number 2, can you tell the council what that is?
Exhibit number 2 is a combination of 10 photographs that were taken today of the property at 1911 Crown Avenue.
Also by you?
Yes, sir.
And do those fairly and accurately depict the condition of the photographs when you took them today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What time did you take them today?
Let's say somewhere between the hours of 1 and 2 p.m. this afternoon.
Thank you. Okay. And would you describe what you've observed of the property that gives you particular concern as a public health inspector?
The method of how garbage is being collected and stored on the property, and the method of storage of rainwater that's being gathered at the premises.
Okay. Is the premises served by water service?
No, sir, it does not.
Okay. And you've issued orders directing that it be served by
Yes, sir.
served with water service, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
To date, those issues have not been, or those orders have not been obeyed, is that correct?
Not to date, sir, no.
Okay. And that's also caused you to issue a public health complaints against Ms. Hammock that are pending before the Hamilton County Municipal Court, is that correct?
Those accusations are pending, yes, sir.
Okay. How is this rainwater being collected, and where is it being stored?
It's my opinion that they're being stored in various plastic containers, tote boxes, etc. I believe it's being collected using sheets of plastic, maybe perhaps a piping arrangement off of a rear downspout in some fashion.
And what's the public health problem with that?
Well, now that as our temperatures rise, the mosquito issue is a big concern for us. The spread of mosquitoes.
By virtue of the water?
The water provides an environment for the mosquito to lay their eggs and the larvae to develop into mature insects.
And this has happened at this site before, is that correct?
Yes,
Previous summers?
we documented that this condition had occurred last year.
And there continues to be water accumulated at the site by Ms.
Catching
Hammock?
of water still continues, yes.
Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions at this point. I don't know whether any of the members of the council have questions.
Anyone else? Ms. Braden?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Just one, maybe two. How do we document that mosquitoes are growing and larvae growing to be bugs? Fly? How do we document that exactly? I'm just curious how that is documented.
Untreated water left to stand, whether it's in a flower pot that would hold an overflow from watering your flowers. Any type of standing water is a source for mosquitoes to breed and multiply.
Right.
Tire, that's why we have such strict regulation on storage of tires. It's a mosquito haven waiting to happen. Anything that can hold water for a period of time. I don't pretend to know what the magic minute or hour is of that time, but it's standing water promotes mosquito multiplication.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can I respond, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, I appreciate that. I wasn't looking for, I just thought there might have been something that I didn't realize that you were using. But I understand that. So do we know that Ms. Hammock is staying at the property without water?
We know that a water application for service has never been applied for since she's owned the property.
Just one more response. Do we know that she owes a previous balance, a reason why, or just doesn't want to turn the water on? Do we?
Yeah, I would ask that I'm unaware that a previous balance carries over from the previous owner, but you would have to ask her why she's not established.
Thank you, Mr. Shelby.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Anyone else?
I know we did this last year where we cleaned her yard, and did we clean the backyard as well? Because isn't that where most of the water collection is happening? Did those get cleared out? Because I know you mentioned there were mosquitoes last summer.
We removed debris that met the definition under the state guidelines. I didn't bring those guidelines with me today to quote from that, but we followed those guidelines to the best of our ability. What was removed from the property, not only the front, the side, and the rear.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Royce. Mrs. Hoover?
Could we see the pictures?
We have two different packages. Which one? Do you want both packs?
That'd be lovely.
Okay.
I can send a pack this way with the same photographs.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just switch me here.
Exhibit 1 is from, that's from today.
So this is today.
Yeah.
Mrs. Franzen?
I had a question for you, Mr. President.
Yes.
Can I help to answer Mr. Braden's question regarding mosquitoes using
course.
my entomology
Yes, please.
expertise? Mosquitoes' life cycle takes about 8 to 10 days. Any sort of standing water provides a haven for mosquitoes. That's how a lot of invasive species have gotten over, is transporting items from overseas with water and eggs within them. It is also a public health risk. It's known to be one on Army bases, particularly in tropical areas. That's something that they have entomologists on staff to try to help with. Around here, we luckily don't have yellow fever, malaria, et cetera, but there are still some communicable diseases with mosquitoes, West Nile virus. I have not heard of any Zika, but that is a thing in Florida, and potentially some other mosquito-borne illnesses that are less common and less deadly. But just wanted to add my information as an entomologist.
Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. Mr. Thompson, sir.
Yes, just a kind of a follow-up to Ms. Royce's comment. We addressed this last year and the cleanup was made. So has the property been re-littered, I guess, in the last year's time?
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Any other questions or comments for Mr. Shelby? Thank you, Mr. Shelby.
If I may say, if I'm allowed, in the interest of fairness, okay, I'd like this to be known. I've documented the condition of the property through the fall of last year and the early spring of this year. And I noticed a dramatic change to the property today, and I documented that with the photographs. I wanted that to be part of the record. In the interest of fairness, we have documented that she made an immediate change that is shown by those photographs that I took today. Okay? And whether that has any connection with this hearing or not, you make your own mind. But I felt it was worthy to make that point.
One more comment. Mr. Brady. Can you describe, is that a good change? Like, did she go clean it up a little, or is there more debris?
I would
Which
say
way
there was
we?
a positive change today,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
But I would also, if I may add, we're not here because the property was in the condition that it is today. We're here because of what has accumulated prior to when we cleaned it up last year. I believe that was in May or June.
June
of last
15th.
year. The accumulation that has continued, she continued to accumulate junk, trash, and debris on the property.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, sir.
Is there still what you would characterize under the Ohio Revised Code definition of litter on the property,
There could be some.
on the outside of the property?
Yes, there would be some, yes.
As well as the accumulated water,
Water.
right, which would be characterized as unsanitary in nature?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this
Thank
point.
you, Mr. Gary. Thank you, Mr. Shelby.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and testify?
I'm going to call Sean Keenan forward. Mr. Keenan, would you raise your right hand and be sworn, please? You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in these proceedings, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Would you say your name and spell your last name, please?
Sean Keenan, Keenan.
And how are you related to 1911 Crown Avenue?
Unfortunately, next door.
Okay. And what have you observed next door as to the littering on the property?
It's horrendous. The backyard. I've lived there for probably 8 years. I got
Okay.
a lot invested in the house next to it, so that's why the question is, why don't you move? I don't want to move. The backyard is so bad, and I think I sent you videos yesterday of all the stagnant water that she's collecting. It still is. I mean, this has been a problem forever. And for her to live there for, I think, some 13 years now with no running water is beyond me. And I think there's a law that, running water in a house. So here comes the smells. I've a fire pit in the backyard I would grow out, and I did it one time last year because it was so bad. I'm sure I missed what Jim said, but the mosquitoes, it just. And there was a neighbor on the other side of that house that he moved last year because it was so bad. He moved, and he wouldn't let his kids out playing his yard because of mosquitoes. And I can't tell you how much money we spent on spraying the lawn. Almost every time I cut the grass, I spray the lawn. But, I mean, something has to be done. I mean, it doesn't make this city look good. It really doesn't. And for her to still live in that house and be able to live in that house is beyond me. And we've spoken many times. So, I mean, whatever this council can, do, like we did last year, like you tried last year to go to her house, and you see what happened.
Yes, sir.
And, and she had so much crap built up on the left side, and I guess she was given notice about this hearing today. So she cleaned all that up. She put half it in her backyard. And she has 2 vehicles up at Lowe's, up in the bridge, and she stores all the stuff in. The last time she cleaned all that stuff up, she put the stuff in there. It was like less than 30 days. There's that box truck back, take the stuff out, put it in her backyard. So, I'm sure I recognize your faces, a lot of you, from the last time I spoke. When I went down to Hamilton County Courthouse and testified in front of a jury of the pictures and videos that I'd taken. And the one thing that I can't show you is the smell. And I had somebody in the city suggested me to have a grill out, have all you come over to my house. And that's the truth, and I don't know, so, and in the summertime, I got to work in the morning, I'm out there 6 a.m. in the morning, I just smell. So you can imagine all day, it's just best.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan.
Any questions?
Any questions or comments? Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Keenan, I'm sorry you're putting up with this. I wanted to be, the history, this is ongoing. I really wanted to be the guy to clean that property up for you and your neighbors surrounding Mr. Stacy. I really wanted to be the guy to clean that up for you guys. And the offer still stands. If she has my phone number, if she was to call me and say, come help me, I would be there immediately. So as I pivot, my point is if my offer still stands. I'm going to vote to clean this property up. If she calls me, I will be there tomorrow to help with that. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Anyone else have any questions or comments?
And I have one more thing I'll say. I know this is the second time I've spoken in front of you guys. I've spoken in front of a judge in Down County. But this is going on for forever. And why is it taking so long? What do we need to do as a community?
Can I respond?
Yes, sir.
Sir, thank you. I think what I'm having a hard time with is the actual overreach of government. Like, how much power do we really want government to have? Do we really want us to have the power to go and get her out of her home and take the home? Or I don't really know what the limit is, because I'm a little worried about that limit that government may have. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm fighting over the actual what we are allowed or what we are prepared to do. I'm a little concerned about that. So that's just the only problem now. I want the property cleaned up. I'm standing with you from now on, and that's what we're going to do, whatever it takes, and I'm on your side. But I am a little concerned. That concerns me as a watching the government and the power that they might have to take an individual's property or belongings is a little concerning to me. So that's where I'm battling in my own personal beliefs. But other than that, we get the property cleaned up. I'm standing with you and your.
No running water for 12 years.
It's unacceptable. Unacceptable. I agree. I agree.
I guess the videos that I sent, have anybody seen those, Tim?
Yes.
No, they have not. I was going on the basis of the photographs that Mr. Shelby took last Thursday and today.
Because I have videos that I sent Mr. Gary of her with this big bucket of brown, nasty water, filling up buckets, and then going into her house and going out in the backyard. She's taking grass clippings from somebody's grass and using that for cat litter in her backyard. Right? I appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and testify? Mr. Gary, would you swear her in, please?
Sure. Ma'am, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you're given this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina. I am Elena's neighbor across the street. And I appreciate you coming and helping her clean her yard up that one time when you came. I think it was last year. But the thing is, once you get it cleaned up, she accumulates it again. I just saw her not too long ago, like last week, bringing in doors that she has picked up out of somebody's garbage and took them to her house. I just saw this last week. And she does it all the time. If you can help her with that, that's fine, you know, but I just wanted to make that statement. It's going to just keep happening. You clean her yard up, and it's just going to get accumulated again, because I think she has some type of a hoarding problem.
Gina, what is your last name and how do we spell it?
Helton, Helton.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Mrs. Sullivan? Mr. Brady?
Ms. Held, thank you for your comments today, and I have also witnessed exactly what you're saying. In the past week, I've been by there several times, witnessed bringing from the garbage into the property. So I have actually witnessed it myself, so I feel for you, the neighbors, and prepared to stand with you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Anyone else? Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and testify? Come forward. You want to swear her in, Mr. Gary?
Ma'am, would you raise your right hand? Repeat after me. I solemnly swear
I solemnly swear
to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
to help me God.
Thank you.
My name is Nyoka Cope. I live on Lincoln Avenue. I'm just curious, how can someone live in a house for, I guess you said 13 years or so, with no running water? That's a hazard. I mean, what if other people in Norwood did the same thing and we didn't have running water? I mean, I can't believe that the city has let her do this.
Ma'am, the city's not letting her do this.
Because I mean, I honestly thought every one of us, you live in a city that you have to have running water in your home.
And that's the law. And she's violating the law. She's been ordered to comply with the law. She hasn't, and she's being
said
prosecuted
13
for it.
years. I mean, that's a long time.
I know.
And that's putting her neighbors in jeopardy too, because like I said, the smell and waste hazard in her home. Is this woman like an older woman or young or?
I think she's probably in her mid to late 50s.
Oh. Okay. I mean, I don't know her, I was just curious about the water thing. That just blows my mind. That she doesn't have running water and hasn't had it since she's owned the place. But thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to come and testify? Please come forward. Good evening, sir. Mr. Gary?
Sir, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Would you say your name, please?
Kenny Stacy,
Okay.
1437 or 1436 Franklin Avenue on the corner. So it's been, and I don't know if I should bring this up here, but it's like multiple times. It's like, she'll come down to I'll be in my yard cleaning. I got a big yard, privacy fence, whatever. And she'll just come over and put her phone over there, whatever. But last year I had to go to Mr. Shelby at the health department because, a rodent issue coming from her yard, and I figured out where it was coming from. It was coming from my neighbor's yard, which was adjacent to me, on Franklin Avenue. All right, so we put traps there, we put traps, in my yard, whatever. My yard's pristine. Finally caught the rats.
whatever. But, you know, it's still continuing to happen. It's like, they come from her house, there's a hole this big in the fence, right? So, you know, that's where we set the traps. And Mr. Shelley was kind enough to, you know, give me the traps to set. You know, it's just like, it continues to go on. It's like, I try to avoid it at all means. You know, I don't even want my dog that way. I take him the other way, but it's like, you know, it's like the stench. I can smell it 2 houses away. You know, we don't even go in Mr. Keenan's yard anymore because we just stay in my yard. You know, and then she'll come down, you know, with her camera doing this and doing that. But, you know, like I said, I got it on my phone right now if you'd like to see it. You know, I've caught the rats coming from her yard, which is horrendous, right? I mean, but I just don't know what else we can do. I mean, it's like, John, I understand, you know, you're trying to do the right thing, right? But it's like, as soon as you do the right thing, she's going to turn around and do the opposite of it. She's done it, she's proved it. So for you to, and you know, I'm not saying the wrong things here. It's just like, you know, you try to do the right thing, but guess what? As soon as you do, it goes back to the same thing. We have to deal with it. You know, summer's coming up. It's not even hot out right now. We're talking 75 degrees out right now, and you can still smell it. What do you think it's going to be when it's 90? Right? I got Mr. Mosquito come to my house. He sprays my yard. That's why we stay here in my yard. And I'm 2 houses away. But I shouldn't have to deal with the rodents. My yard is pristine. You know, I mean, seriously, I got 1 dog, doesn't do anything wrong, right? You know, she's already threatened to, you know, do whatever to him. You know, I'll throw some poison over him. I don't bother her, but I don't need to deal with the stuff that she's coming in with. It's like, as soon as I go out there to, you know, blow my leaves off, or I got the biggest tree in Norwood on the corner there. You know that, John.
Had a beautiful place.
Right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so not only do I clean her yard, his yard, my yard, Gina's yard, I blow it all into my yard. I pick it up and I put it in bags. All right, I work for the schools. All right, I'm not trying to be, you know, different to any of my neighbors, you know, but there's no sense for her to treat me any different. All right, and that's what's happening. I understand you want, you know, to be, you know, hey, you know, I'll help you, I'll help out. Hey, I help people all the time. That's my job. But it gets to a point where, you know, you got to sit there and say, hey, you know, when's it going to stop? I'm sitting outside yesterday in my own yard, all right, and get the cops called 3 times on me. 3 times. And it's like, why? The reason is because I'm cleaning my yard, and she had to come down here with a camera. So, yeah, you know, me being me, I started filming her just for the hell of it. I didn't have my camera on, you know, but I did. That's when she called, you know, the police officers. You know, they came down, they stayed 15 seconds, you know, because they know the situation. And it's like, I'm leaving. It is what it is. But the problem is, I live 2 houses away. There's no reason for her to come down 2 houses away from my house. All right? No matter who I have in my yard, no matter what I'm doing in my yard, cleaning, you know, I clean my yard every day. You know, I got a ton of pollen that falls from the tree. You know, I clean the gutters, I do that. I use my blower a lot. You know, but there's no reason for her to come down there and harass me. You know, hey, 2-3 months ago when this started happening, I tried to work with you guys. I tried to work with Sonny, because Sonny came here and wanted to be her voice, right? And I like Sonny. He's done a lot for the schools, but he's done nothing to resolve the situation, right? No slap against him. Absolutely no slap against him. But he was her voice that night. She's not here tonight. And there's a reason for that, because she knows what's going on. But it just continues to happen. So when's it stop? You know, and John, I've known you a long time, but it's like, you know, you're trying to do the right thing by helping her. Nothing's been accomplished.
I'm prepared to stand with you, sir, right now. I've pivoted to
I mean,
trying to help her, and I still will help her. But at this point, I'm ready to help the residents around her to get it cleaned up. And You have my full support, Mr. Stacy.
Get it cleaned up and being sustained, you know?
Yes, sir.
I was operation manager for, Sherwin-Williams for 27 years, You know the 5S program. Just sustain it and let's go with it. But we gotta sustain it.
Are you okay with the dialogue, sir, on it? So what's the resolution? We got to get her out of the home? What's the resolution exactly? I'm just curious. We have to get her out and just sell the home off to someone else? I mean,
Well, the resolution is to, once you want to get to the point of, you helping her sustain the situation, with her yard or whatever it is, right?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
You gotta sustain it. It doesn't get sustained after we talk here. You did what you did. I agree. You tried to help her. The city of Norwood tried to help her. But
Now it's time to make her.
Huh?
Now it's time to make her.
But how's that happen? Because once you guys do that, after that point, she goes back to the same thing.
Yes, sir, yeah.
I mean,
That's a problem. That's a problem. I feel for this lady. I really feel for her like I would feel for my family, or I really do. I mean, she's by herself. I feel like she's alone. I mean, I feel for her. I do. And I know people don't want to hear that because they're so fed up and they, just like have so much distress for her, but I feel for her. She's alone and probably needs help.
Okay, then how do we help her?
I'd like to know that because I would definitely do it.
I mean, it's a simple solution. It's like, we'll help you, we won't bother you, keep your yard clean.
Yeah.
And we won't
You'd
bother
probably help her. You'd probably help her.
She doesn't want our help.
I know.
Mrs. Sewell, you had a question?
Yes, this might be a question for you, sir, possibly for Mr. Shelby. From after the city did the full cleanup till it became an issue again, what was the time frame? Weeks, months?
It was weeks. I mean, what she does is, she's made it public clear to everybody and to us that, she likes to go out and she garbage picks. That's what she likes to do.
So, I mean, I want to interrupt you
But she
because
says-
I know what you're talking about. In terms of the clutter it fills, it's a vacuum and it gets filled back up. My question was just about how long, and it sounds like it's pretty quick, about a month or so. Not even that.
Not even.
So my question is, we did the cleanup in June, it's now May, right? So I guess one of my questions is, how can we shorten the window that it comes back to our attention? Is that a way of moving towards a solution, that it's not 11 months that we're bringing notice again?
Mr. Garrett, is that a question for yourself?
We can bring these more frequently.
It's
It's just,
Can I say something?
sure.
So, she's going to continue to do what she wants. That's okay. But it's like, you can't go out, and she's made it, public to everybody. It's what she does. Because she's looking for items that she can resell or do whatever she wants to do. Hey, that's good.
They're
But you have
evaluating.
to bring it home and just set it in your front yard. That's what's happening.
Precisely.
I mean,
So the question-
There was a person that left last week across the street from her house. And she was literally over there going through their garbage, picked up all the clothes, I got it on my phone, that she picked up from that house is now hanging on trees in her backyard.
Right, so I'm moving, I think we're all pretty clear on what the problem is, and she's bringing things in with great rate. What I'm focusing on is how can we move towards a solution? I'm wondering if we are looking every single month, and this is an issue, and we have to do this every single month, is that what it is going to take to make change? Or is that the first step to then maybe doing something? And I really appreciate your reluctance to use strong government, reach. I really respect that. But is that a way of moving towards that resolution without doing something as drastic as
taking her home.
I have a comment. Correct me if I'm wrong, you probably would know this a little better, but the last time they cleaned up, and this could go to your point, you was asking how long it took from when we cleaned the property up to where we're at now. It's my understanding that the last time that they cleaned this property up, they didn't actually get all the debris in the backyard. They cleaned up a bunch of the front yard and they tried to make it to the back, but it's my understanding that they didn't actually get it all cleaned up, that maybe there was some things left last time. Do you have anything to say about that?
There was things left last time, but.
It didn't all get cleaned up.
No, it wasn't totally clean.
No.
I mean, no, it wasn't totally clean. But the problem is, it's like, she's still gonna continue to do what she does. She loves it.
Yeah, no, I've seen her, I've witnessed
If that's what she wants to
it.
do, that's fine.
I've seen it.
But she'll go out the following day and then garbage pick, but guess what? Those items go straight to her yard.
I'd like to make a request.
That again causes the problem with everybody else. It's like, it's an eyesore, not only that, but there's like, if it rains, then what? It is what it is.
It's disgusting. I understand, Mr. Stacy. I think this time, I don't know exactly know what we're doing tonight. Are we voting to get the yard cleaned up again tonight? And if so, I think we clean the yard up and we don't leave a thing. We clean it and we don't leave a thing, nothing. We clean the yard. Like just make sure this time if we do it, we get it very well. Does that make sense? So, maybe that helps a little bit.
To what end?
Okay, which would be perfect, right? But what would happen, what's gonna happen,
She's just going to bring it back. I
Okay,
understand her
and then what
state of
happens?
mind. I get it.
And then what happens?
We look to government to try to step up the game and figure out how to get your problem solved, I guess.
Ms. Royce, do you have a question, comment?
My question's for Mr. Gary. Would every 60 days be like a feasible timeline to follow up on this? I don't know how
Sure.
much paperwork this
I mean,
is for you.
It's not a question of,
The
a magic
ability?
number of days. The question is, when is there a litter as that is defined in the statute in her yard?
Okay.
And, we can do it more frequently than that, but I'll tell you, I prosecuted a jury trial against her for littering. She was convicted by a jury, not by some judge, but by a jury of her peers.
Right.
And rather than clean her yard, the judge gave her 30 days from the time that she was convicted to clean her yard, and rather than clean her yard, she did 30 days in the Justice Center because she wouldn't do it.
Right.
I mean,
I have a follow-up.
sure.
So I know that when the city does this, the city pays for the initial cleaning, right? And then we put a lien on
Yes.
her property. Did she pay the lien last time?
No,
So the lien still stands?
I have yet to file that.
Oh, you have, okay.
And I'll do it again.
Okay.
Or I'll do it when the time,
Okay.
if we're allowed to clean the place up again.
Okay. I was just wondering. I didn't know if she had paid the amount.
No.
Because if she's paying it, obviously, then it'd be less of an issue, I
No.
feel like.
What I'm seeking from the council is a finding that there is and continues to be a quantity of litter throughout the side and backyards of her place, and that she be directed to collect and remove that litter within 15 days as provided by the statutes. And those are Ohio Revised Code Section 731 and following, 731.51, I think, and following several sections.
Mrs. Monroe?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Gary. I was going to ask kind of the history of the legalities that have been going on with that property, just for everyone to understand why she's been able to live there so long.
Well, I mean, we've been here for about half that time, but just so that you understand, she's facing a criminal trial next week for obstructing official business, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct when the city paid a contractor to come in on June the 15th of last year.
Thank you. I think that's good information for everyone to know. Can you give us legal counsel on what we can do going forward? Like, Ms. Roy said, like every 60 days, we look at this. We've kind of talked about this in the nuisance ordinance of, hey, you're getting hit X amount of times in a certain time frame. Can we utilize that with this property going forward so we can do something?
Well, we can do it every 60 days or as Mr. Shelby deems necessary, based upon the condition of the place.
I don't know if Mr. Shelby has any input on the frequency for that. That would be okay.
The frequency could be complaint driven. After the cleanup, I testified earlier that I didn't bring some material and I want to recant that because I was reviewing it as I was sitting. The guidelines that we met last June under the state statute, and it is correct that not everything in the backyard was removed, but I reiterate that we did remove, I supervised the removal of items that met the definition of the Ohio Revised Code. And I stand with that. To answer your question about the frequency, it could be complaint driven. Yes. We can't be accused of singling her out. And as the accumulation began to build up after the June 15, 2022 cleanup, that's when I started documenting what I could see from the street.
Thank you, Mr. Shelby. Mr. Thompson, do you have your hand up, sir?
Just a question on process here. Do we need to have a vote as to whether we agree, like motion that we choose to determine that there is evidence of litter and say that it's okay to write a notice?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna hand you a draft of the letter that we would send to her with the salient parts underlined. Here's another copy of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Stacy?
Oh, not for Mr. Stacy, but I just do have a comment, sir. I would be leery on us taking action. You know, the health department and the building, they have their protocols, and they deal with this all the time. So their protocol will be to bring it to us, and then we'll take action from there. As far as us taking action, that I would probably discourage that maybe, and let them take care of their protocols, bring it to us, and then we'll take action. That's what I recommend, but I'm just one guy amongst my peers.
Ms. Brady, anyone else? Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and testify? If not, then I hereby close this public hearing. Mr. Thompson.
I'd like to make a motion. Motion that this council determines that there's evidence that there's litter on the land at 911 Crown Avenue, as defined in ORC 73151B, and that this council authorizes immediate written notice to Alana Hammock and her company, My Prosperity LLC, of this finding, and that there's litter on her land, and that she must collect and remove all that litter within 15 days after the written notice is received.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. May I have a second? Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second that.
Second by Mr. Brady. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to requests to address council. This evening, I have two requests to address council. The first request is Meg Albers. Please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Meg Albers. I live at 1810 Hopkins, and I wish I wasn't standing in front of you tonight. Unfortunately, I felt the need to appear after my name was mentioned by a council candidate speaker, Jeff Burton, during a previous council meeting. Not only was it mentioned in a disparaging way, but this body of elected officials sat quietly while this was occurring. While each of you may recognize me from the successful legal action that I've taken against the city of Norwood, the citizens of Norwood who care enough about this city, like myself, deserve to hear the truth about what I stand for. I moved to Norwood 10 years ago. I rented for 3 years before making the decision to invest in the city and purchase my home. Unlike renters who have no financial investment in this city, my home is a huge investment, and what happens in this city affects me personally and financially. I take pride in my house, have kept up with the maintenance, and improved it like any responsible homeowner should do. I have an idea why my name came up as the butt of his joke. Let's talk about what's happened over the past few years. My neighbor decided to go for a variance and wanted to paint a mural of a bunny rabbit with a recorded story about the bunny on the side of her building. While I can appreciate art, as I am myself an artist, I personally felt that the addition of this mural with the constant blaring of this bunny story would not only drive me crazy, but it would have a negative impact on the value of my house. The owner of the building entrenched herself with a politician who was more interested in his personal causes than the law, as well as a special interest group who was more interested in their personal agenda than that of the citizens of Norwood. Because I wasn't on their side, or what they viewed as the popular side of the argument, I was vilified, was accused of being a racist, and was called other nasty names, and was told that if my neighbors and I didn't like it, that we should move. I was also labeled evil-spirited and the face of evil. If anyone would like to learn more about this incident, feel free to go to courtclerks.org, look up my action against the city, and see how that turned out. Also, check out the second lawsuit, which was settled financially in my favor. Am I evil? Do I hate Emily Franzen? Well, if you call caring about my city evil, I guess I am. If you call investing in my home and wanting to protect the value of it from private interest groups who want nothing more than to create housing options that will have adverse effects on my home evil, then I guess I am. If you call someone who wants to protect the children of our city by speaking out against allowing sexual offenders into our public buildings evil, then I guess I'm evil. If you call someone who successfully holds their elected officials accountable when they don't follow the rules and laws of our city and our state evil, then I guess that also makes me evil. Election years always bring the attention-seeking candidates out of the woodwork, as evidenced by Mr. Burton's speech last week. This is a man who has not appeared in front of council before, yet felt emboldened enough to slander me in a public forum. His behavior and bad jokes were highly inappropriate for a meeting of city council. Despite of what Mr. Gurdon or anyone else says, I wanted to make sure that you had a true and accurate picture of who Meg Alberts is. Like so many of us who live in the city, I am generational. I built great relationships with my neighbors, many that I consider family. I will continue to stand up for what I believe in. I will continue to hold elected officials accountable. And I'm not going anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alberts. Our next request to address council is Ms. Henry.
Hi, everybody. I'm here and I want to talk about what I feel is bias in our city's housing plan process. As some of you know, a recent housing committee meeting was held to discuss ways to create more affordable Section 8 low-income housing in Norwood. However, what concerns me is the lack of representation and bias in the selection of the individuals who are involved in creating the housing action plan in our housing committee's movements. Only 13 hand-picked people were selected to be interviewed for this project. Most, if not all of them, were affiliated with special interest groups or are non-residents. Most, if not all, had their own personal interest and agendas in moving forward with what might be government-funded projects surrounding affordable housing in Norwood. I was one of 5 residents or homeowners who attended the meeting concerning bringing in more low-income housing. We sat quietly, we listened, and left after the discussion was concluded. At the end of the meeting, after we left, they reopened discussion. and eventually the question of a town hall meeting ensued. A council person then stated, quote, "Unfortunately, town halls tend to sway more homeowners. Higher income. They have more access. We have to be aware that information is going to be slanted," unquote. Slanted because homeowners are concerned about their biggest investments, which are their property values. Slanted after this project is the direct result from a special interest group study using only 13 hand-picked residents. And at that meeting, their experts for their presentation were all from special interest groups. We have to ask ourselves if this is a fair representation and cross-section of the residents of this city. No, it's not, and I think that's obvious. What's even more concerning is that a council member would denigrate homeowners and insinuate those homeowners of being biased because they want to know what's happening in the city. Why do homeowners have more access to meetings? This is a false representation that perpetrates bias and leads to skewed representation of our city's demographics. This is exactly why people are reluctant to get involved or go to meetings and express their opinions. We didn't even express our opinions at that meeting. Norwood is a diverse community with a much higher rate of low-income individuals than the national average. This is not about not wanting to help people. It is about the importance to find a balance between helping those in need and ensuring the sustainability of the community while considering the consequences when property values can be negatively impacted. As landlords and Norwood homeowners, my husband and I have personal experience with helping low-income tenants. We have done this for decades. There needs to be a broader, balanced discussion about the impact of this proposed plan on the community as a whole, not just for the benefit of a special interest groups or individuals. New residents should ask those who have been here for a long time what the city was like with all the split up homes and out-of-town landlords renting to low income. It was said at this meeting that Norwood needs to get rid of some of our building codes to make it easier for low-income landlords to invest here. And I'm told that the city's community developer is already working on those codes to do such. In the past, the abundance of low-income properties were extremely detrimental to our city, or to our neighborhoods, and we mustn't go down that path again. If this city hadn't improved its standard through codes and enforcement, most of the newer homeowners would not own homes in Norwood today. You must work. No, it's your job to create a plan that is inclusive of all members of our community. Norwood homeowners are the foundation of this city, and we have the right to become involved, speak when we want to, and to protect our investments. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to reports of standing committees of council. We have two this evening. The first is the committee report, Committee of the Whole, dated 3/14/23, to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio. We, your Committee of the Whole, to whom was referred, discuss strategic plan to allow the opportunity to discuss the main goals for council for the year and will allow for transparency with projects. Beg leave to submit the following report. Council discussed strategic planning within the city. Mrs. Winterbauer suggested that the Safety Service Director, Noah Powers, discuss with the department heads each month to discuss budget and incoming projects. One department per month checks in with council during the Committee of the Whole. Respectfully submitted, Ken Miracle Chairperson, Mrs. Hoover, Mr. Braden, Mrs. Winterbauer, Ms. Royce, Mrs. Franzen, and Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Hoover.
I make a motion, we receive and file.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to receive and file the report. Mr. Thompson.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members are present, voting aye, motion passes. Moving on to item J2, committee report, Housing, Health, and Public Safety. Mrs. Hoover.
Thank you, sir. Thursday, April the 6th, 2023, to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we are Committee of Housing, Health, and Public Safety, to whom was referred Coyotes. Begged leave to submit the following report. Information was shared on coyotes and public safety. Committee recommends information be shared by the city on our social media outlets. Respectfully submitted, Susan Hoover, Chairperson, Mrs. Winterbauer, Ms. Royce, Ms. Alexis Royce.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Ms. Winterbauer.
Motion to receive and file?
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to receive and file. Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, motion passes. Moving on to item L, second reading of ordinances and resolutions. L1, resolution adopting the City of Norwood Treasurer's Office investment policy. Mr. Thompson.
Move we have the second reading.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to have the second reading. Mr. Braden.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, motion passes.
Resolution adopting the City of Norwood Treasurer's Office investment policy.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Moving on to M1, introductory reading of ordinances and resolutions. M1, ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2023 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Move we suspend the rules and have all three readings.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
This is just a clerical thing, moving funds from one Rookwood TIF fund into another Rookwood TIF fund in order to make a TIF debt payment.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes.
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2023 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2023 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Thompson.
Move we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to pass the ordinance. Mr. Braden.
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item M2, ordinance of the City of Norwood, Ohio, authorizing non-union employee pay rates. Mr. Thompson.
Would move we suspend the rules and have the first two readings of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to suspend the rules and have the first two readings. Ms. Franzen?
I second.
Second by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson.
I'd like to invite Mr. Powers to come up and talk a little bit about this.
Thank you. Good evening. So the ordinance presented here this evening is similar to the style of ordinance you'll see in a lot of communities in our area, setting salary rates and pay rates for employees. So this is dealing with specifically the non-union employees. These are, generally speaking, exempt and non-exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So some of these positions are hourly, some of these positions are salary positions. What you see broken down here is all hourly rates. Reason for that is so that you can look at the positions quickly and kind of compare and contrast what the pay rates are. Instead of having them in one form in one spot and another form in another spot. Any of these rates can be turned into an annual rate by multiplying by 2,080. That's typically what a person works in the year, unless they have one of those odd 27 paid period years, which occurs once every 11 years. So we do have to take account of that. So you have the positions broken down by department, makes it a little bit easier than what we've done in the past, which is just a straight list down. You do also have a quantity. So the positions, when they are full-time, it says how many of those you can have, so that's an authorization by council, how many of those can be employed. You don't have that with part-time because the part-time schedules can tend to vary so much. I may have somebody who works 10 hours, I may have somebody who works 5 hours, have somebody who works up to 20 hours. So those are kind of set more by budgetary process than by quantity. Also, a couple of sections at the end that deal with some specific items. How raises are done. There are some provisions for what happens if the minimum wage rate changes before this salary ordinance is updated again, so those rates come up to the minimum if that would surpass them. It also has a provision for temporary increases. Temporary increases would be done for a person who's filling a higher level or for somebody who's just frankly doing an absolutely extraordinary job at what they're doing. So that temporary pay increase can be up to 10% and can last for up to 90 days. Can't be done more than once in a year. There's also a specific section in here dealing with the benefits for the police and fire chief. This wouldn't impact the current police and fire chief, but what we're trying to do in that section is to get away from what we've had to do in the past, which is to have kind of these one-off ordinances like we did a couple of months ago and have individualized agreements. So setting something so when we have those promotional opportunities in the future, we do that if they're offering that promotion. So a little more certainty for our folks as they're taking that. Also has a section in here to deal with the administrative specialist, which was another one of those positions we did sort of a one-off ordinance earlier this year. So kind of gives a rundown of how that's set up. That was a combination of 2 part-time positions, so those 2 part-time positions are still in this ordinance. But what it says is you can't fill those 2 part-time positions as long as there's 1 full-time position is filled. There's also a provision in here stating that this will be reviewed annually by council, so council can do updates, make changes as they see fit. Be happy to take any questions.
Anyone? Mr. Thompson?
No questions, just want to comment, there is some matter of urgency with this. We'd like to try to get it done this month, which is why we're doing the 2 readings now. I'm going to be calling a finance committee meeting to happen between now and our next normal council meeting to go over this in a little bit more depth. If anybody else has questions, once they get into it, we'll be discussing that, but wanted to have that opportunity to run it through finance. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Powers. Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Thompson, second by Mrs. Franson, to suspend the rules and have the first 2 readings. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes.
An ordinance of the City of Norwood, Ohio, authorizing non-union employee pay rates. An ordinance of the City of Norwood, Ohio, authorizing non-union employee pay rates.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Moving on to item N, administrative reports. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'll jump right back on the ordinance that you guys just did the 2 readings on. And in front of you, as you came in, there should have been a letter. We successfully interviewed candidates for the HR position and came up with a candidate that we feel is going to be a real resource for the city. This candidate, so in front of you is the letter where it's basically her offer letter, and council needs to approve. I'm asking for council's approval for this person to come in at a higher start rate so that they can start out. The base rate for an HR director for the city of Norwood is $57,200 on the previous ordinances. As the mayor, as the person appointing authority, I have the ability to take it up 10%, which takes an HR director to $62,000, $63,000, which is not enough money to get a qualified HR director. So we made an offer. She's accepted that offer. It's in the letter that you see in front of you. And one of the stipulations was that we recognize her previous years of public service, and so she'll end up with couple weeks more of vacation than she would as a starting fresh employee. But I think she's highly qualified. I think Treasurer Bonzo sat in on the interview with me, and Noah Powers, our safety service director, sat in on the interview. We had a couple of good candidates, but I think that Marie Springer is going to be a really good addition to the city of Norwood. And I'm asking for you guys, I guess after we come out of my report, or I could take a minute, I'm asking for council to take a quick vote and approve this candidate, so.
Mrs. Hoover?
Thank you. I'd like to move to receive, file, and accept the appointment with the salary indicated, with only an edit to specify on page 2 that it's 120 units of vacation time.
We have a motion by Mrs. Hoover. May I have a second? Mrs. Winterbauer?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any further discussion? Please show the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye, motion passes.
Thank you. And then back on that, the ordinance, one of the things that Noah is bringing to the table, Safety Service Director is bringing to the table with that ordinance is a combination, a tool that can be used. Right now, we have, when we're putting together the FRP and when they're reviewing them, when the auditor's looking at it, they're looking at 4 or 5 different ordinances saying, wait a minute, what should the salary be of this person? And this is really what I consider to be good business. It's the right way for us to run that and to make sure that that ordinance is to last. And I'm sure you'll have more discussion with the Finance Committee. Streets meeting, we had a streets meeting here recently. It's always interesting to me because it seems like you would just say, go out and pave a street. We got some money, let's go out and pave a street, but it doesn't work that way. We did the street survey a couple years ago, 3 years ago, we did the street survey, and we're still operating off that street survey. I asked the engineering staff in that meeting, how long should our street survey, should we be looking at that street survey, should we refresh that? And basically they said, well, the 10 years, it'll last about 5 to 10 years because all the streets deteriorate in the same manner, so you can continue to use that street survey. So we'll continue to work on that. We've got what this meeting was with the engineering staff, and we were talking about funds and the projects that were going on right now, but now we've got to look out into the next 2 or 3 years and what we're going to do. And that's something we're going to do in-house, try to put together and look at the street survey, come up with the right, and remember, when we did that street survey, we originally said, the engineers said, here's your priority, here's the worst streets you have in the city. Well, we as a group made a decision. We weren't just going to do those 5 streets because they could all be in Ward 1, or those 5 streets could all be in Ward 4. We said we've got to spread this around. We've got to make sure we're hitting the worst streets in different areas. And I think we've been pretty successful in paving streets in each ward and trying to make sure that each ward is getting some of the TLC that it needs, drastically. Varleman is going to be completed soon. I think they've had a couple of different adjustments, the casting adjustments that have to be made, the curbing, all of that looks good, but I think they're going to pave that anytime now. Lincoln is slated to be resurfaced in early August. We'll see Lincoln start getting worked on. Spring of 2024 is slated for Ralston. These are all street projects that you guys have already approved, and the funding's in place, and we're working on those. The public hearing that took place today for the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant Funds, that's allocating more money to some of the street resurfacing that's going to go on Montgomery Road and Smith Road. So that ends up giving us a little bit more money. We had earmarked that for some other improvements. We couldn't really get that program to work right. So now we're able to with that public hearing, we can allocate that in the right place and make a big change there. So those are big ones. The spring newsletter went out. I asked a few people and they said they already got it. There's a ton of information. If you're just using your mobile device, I recommend go ahead and go to norwoodohio.gov, to the website on your computer, and look at it that way. There's a lot, there really is a lot there. But you can do it on your mobile device, don't get me wrong. If you only have a phone, you can just go that way. And then the last thing I want to bring up, because I know, is the the Norwood High School art class did a crosswalk painting at Mills and at Victory Park, and it looked great. They came up with the design. Miller Brothers Paints here in Norwood. Hopefully, when you are painting your house or painting a room or painting anything, you're using Miller Brothers Paints right on Montgomery Road. They've got everything. If you haven't been in that place, they've got everything. They've got the whole design center. La Rosa's, I know a lot of people haven't eaten La Rosa's pizza. La Rosa's gave us a bunch of free pizzas, and then we were able to eat them at the Northwood Cidery right there. So please, hit all those and make sure they know what's going on there. And then I'll say, if I said that was the last thing, I'm sorry that wasn't the last thing. We know that there are challenges with the water meter, the new implementation of the water meters. The administration knows it absolutely. We've heard from a lot of different people on different challenges that are going on. Whether people had their meters, they didn't have access and they were averaged and they're running into issues there. They're not sure why we're replacing water meters, what the reasoning that's behind that. So we have a water meter upgrade, sort of frequently asked questions that will go out and we'll post it online and we'll send it out to everybody who's on the email system. That's somewhat helpful. But we expected to, and we are running into issues with water meters that weren't reading properly, and now they are reading properly. We're running into issues and confusion on when a new water meter gets put in, how the information gets transferred properly, and making sure that things are done, and then people still receiving some of the blue cards. The whole idea behind this is to make it so that we are not coming in your home to read your water meter and you're not getting a blue card. So there's a lot of benefits to this, but there are some bumps that we're going through right now, and we're going to continue to go through those. NOAA and the group in the water department are working on those. Clint Zimmerman's working on those, and we're trying to help people understand sort of the challenges with that. Some of it is an error on the city's part from not being able to read the meters or just different challenges that went on. And then others, there are areas where, this is a utility and somebody has to pay for that water that goes through that meter. And there are some people that do get away with things at times. So, but we're going to continue to work on that. We're going to get more information out and try to help people through it as we go. That's about it. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Mayor Schneider? Thank you, sir. Moving on to item O, unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business this evening? Mrs. Hoover.
Yeah, I'm always good for a couple things. Let's see, unfinished. Want to let folks know that the VP of the Norwood Historical Society reached out. He was able to get copies of the Norwood Tribune from 1923 regarding Marsh Park. They're pretty profound. I did add them to the Google Drive that everyone has access to. I also made copies and put them at folks' seats. We were able to get those in time, so they did go with the application that has been submitted for Marsh Park, so that's really exciting. We'll know this summer if we've been accepted. The Marsh Park survey is still live. I got one of those little yard signs with a QR code at Marsh Park, so that's getting a little extra attention. So we'll leave that up for another month or so and then call a community meeting to get more feedback on that. That's all I have for old. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mrs. Stewart. Anyone else have any unfinished business? And we'll move on to new business. Any new business this evening? Mrs. Franzen.
Yes, I need to call a Parks Committee meeting due to having referred some stuff from the Safety Service Director. So I wanted to see, I was looking on the Google Calendar, and it looks like Monday and Thursday, the council chambers are open. Would any time on that work for those folks on Parks Committee?
Monday would be best.
The 15th, is that
The
the
15th
Monday?
is Monday, and the 18th is Thursday.
I'm out of town on the 18th, but I can do the 15th.
Monday.
All right, 15th it is. So Paul Boyes, who is heading up the Hunter Park Community Garden build, which if you have an opportunity on Tuesday, we will be putting that into action for real. but he wants to name it in honor of a Norwood resident who passed away last year. So we're going to discuss what that means, what we would need to do to allow that to happen. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Franklin.
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, good. Sorry, I forgot to say the time. 6 o'clock. All right.
Anyone else? Any other new business? Mr. Thompson?
We'll call a finance committee meeting for next Tuesday at 6:30. Hopefully, everything's available then. Going to discuss bank reconciliation that we need to do monthly for the FRP and the ordinance we just talked about earlier about the non-union pay rates. 6:30?
Anyone else? Any other new business? Mr. Suber?
I need to set a couple meetings. The law committee, I was hoping we could do Monday the 22nd at 6. Yes? Sweet. Awesome. And then another housing meeting. Do we have anything currently going on Tuesday before council meeting? We do 6:30?
The 23rd.
The 23rd?
Sure.
For housing? And then I have a bunch of other quick announcements. Okay, so I would like to refer to the Housing Committee recycling. I've been having a bunch of conversations with the Hamilton County Resource and getting numbers on where we currently are. Norwood recycles at about 11%, and I'd really like to get a plan to increase that number. That not only reduces what we divert from the landfill, but it also is a way for Norwood to get funding. That's what pays for our yard bags, our recycling bins, composting, lots of things we can do with that money. So that's one thing. Couple health department updates. I had hoped that they would be able to come. They just put out their big annual report. They're hoping to come in the next couple of meetings. But before then, they do have a new grief group starting, and it's going to be facilitated by the health commissioner, Pam Mullen. They're free. They're Tuesdays and Thursdays starting, May 9th, tonight. So you can check that out on the website. The 513 relief bus was such a success, it's coming back on July 25th, 2023. Got some time, but want to get that on the people's radar. I was able to get the police department in contact with Kia, and I just got notification that the steering wheel locks are in. So what that means, if you are a Norwood resident, currently own a 2011 to 2021 Kia, or 2015 to 2021 Hyundai, and the vehicle has a keyed ignition, you're eligible to receive one of the locks. So reach out to the police department. I got a really lovely thank you note from our new police chief. Let's see. Just as a tidbit, there was a comment earlier made about renters. I just want to let everyone know more than half, 55 to 75% of Norwood is made up of renters. My neighbors across the street, they've been renting for over 20 years and are deeply invested in the community. We have a council member who is deeply invested in the community, who's also a renter. So when we're having conversations about housing, I'd like to be sure that we aren't maligning renters, homeowners, high income, low income, that we are truly coming from a place of diversity and inclusion. Let's see. I think that's it, because you talked about the water meters. I'm done. Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Royce?
I am the renter on council. I don't want to get into a fight between, or a disagreement between two residents. But actually, Susan stole the statistics I was going to cite. That's okay. But I mean, I think it goes without saying, renters do invest in this community. In fact, I've invested a lot of my time in the last 3 years into this community. Time that I could have spent doing, frankly, more fun things, not that these meetings are incredibly fun. And I want to speak to the renters. You're valuable, you're important. Owning a home does not make you a better person, does not make you a worse person. It's a matter of capital and land. So to the renters, I just want to say, I certainly value you, I am one of you. And you have a voice on this council, and it's me. And your investments go through local landlords into the land here, and that keeps homeowners' properties values up. And otherwise, those houses would sit vacant, or they'd be occupied by people who just live there and pay the mortgage. The passive income landlords make is from renters, and that money usually goes back into the community or into their pocket. That's entirely up to the landlord. But I just couldn't let that one go. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boyce. I did receive an email from Mr. Stiff today, our auditor. We will have a public hearing for the 2024 tax budget. It's required by the Ohio Revised Code that we have that completed and voted on by July the 20th of 2023. So we're shooting for the second meeting in June. So I want to pass that along to everyone, and I think Ms. Mullins is going to be working on getting that taken care of, taking appropriate action to get that public hearing set up. Anyone else? Mr. Brady.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I just want to comment through, because we all was here, we heard what was said. I didn't really hear a slight on renters tonight from our company. Like, I didn't hear anything against renters. I heard someone voice an opinion on a council person's comment about homeowners. I didn't really hear anybody say anything about renters. So I just wanted to make that comment. I didn't really hear anyone slight any renters of any sort, but I did hear a concern for a citizen as a homeowner being discounted because that was the only ones that would attend a meeting. So I think we may, I didn't hear anything about renters, so thank you.
Any other new business? Ms. Royce?
I can follow up on that. I wrote down the quote. The quote was, "Renters invest nothing in the city." And I just wanted to clarify that they do, was my point. Again, I'm not trying to get into an argument with anyone. Just want to make sure renters who live here, make up half our population, know that they do invest in this city, whether people think they do or not.
Thank you, Ms. Royce.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And we'll move on to communications. Item Q1, Mayor Victor Schneider regarding the Mayor's Court fines, April of 2023.
Dear Mr. President and council members, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of April 2023. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Thompson.
Move we receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to receive and file the letter. May I have a second? Ms. Royce?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Royce. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes. Item Q2, Ohio Division of Liquor Control regarding BB Endeavors / Donna Cap LLC.
So there were emails sent to multiple departments within the city. The Board of Health has no objections. Tax Department, no objections. Fire Department says they are up to date with fire inspections and corrective measures, no objections. The Building Department says they do not have the proper permits for their outside area. This is a violation of code.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Mr. Thompson.
I would move that we receive and file with no hearing requested.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to receive and file with no hearing requested. Ms. Franzen?
I second.
Second by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Mr. Thompson?
My suggestion to the building department would be that if their outdoor space isn't up to code, that they should cite them and not dispute their business liquor license.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? Mrs. Silver?
I'd just like to say I spoke with Drew at Cappy's today regarding the permit issue or the building code issues, and I believe there were 3 different issues
and they are being actively worked on. 2 are already completed. One had to do with exit signs. One was painting something, which has been done, and then final was planting the arborvitae for screening, and that plan was to be is to be done next week. So my understanding from Drew at Cappy's is that is going to be mediated very, very shortly.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Anyone else? Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through the chair to Ms. Hoover,
Yes,
if
sir.
she knows, is this recommendations from the State of Ohio Liquor Control or from Norwood Building Department?
Norwood Building Department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Any other comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item R, excuse absent members. May I have a motion? Mrs. Hoover?
I'm sorry, I have something I missed under communications. Are we allowed to go back, or do I do it next time?
How's this for? Excuse me, Mr. Gary just passed us a note, and it's, excuse me?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
This request for a conference in executive session at the May 9, 2023 regular meeting under Ohio Revised Code 121.22G2. Dear members of council, I write to ask that council consider holding an executive session at its meeting this evening to consider the purchase of property for public purposes, the sale of property at competitive bidding, or the sale or disposition of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit for the use property under Ohio Revised Code 121.22G2. If you have any questions or comments about this request, please feel free to contact the Law Department. Thank you sincerely, Timothy A. Gary Jr., Assistant Law Director. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. A motion to go into executive session under the Ohio Revised Code 121.22,
To receive and file.
please,
And receive and file.
and receive and file the letter.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. May I have a second?
Thank you, Mr. Gears.
Mrs. Franson?
I second.
Second by Mrs. Franson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. We are in executive session at 9:02. Excuse absent members. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to excuse our absent member.
Motion by Mr. Braden. May I have a second? Mrs. Franson.
I second.
Second by Mrs. Franson. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. The motion passes. May I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Franson.
I move we adjourn.
Motion by Mrs. Franson. May I have a second? Mrs. Hoover?
A second?
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yep.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present, voting aye. The motion passes. We are adjourned.